At the Last Supper, Jesus is preparing his apostles for his passion, death, and resurrection. He said to them, "In my Father's house there are many dwelling places. I'm going to go there and prepare a place for you." Great. We're going to get a room with a view. But the dwelling Jesus imagines is the Father's heart. This is about relationships. "Whoever has seen me," Jesus said, "has seen the Father." In chapter 2 in John's Gospel, Jesus went into the temple. He told those who were selling the doves, "Take these things out of here. Stop making my Father's house a marketplace." The Jewish authorities naturally challenged Jesus, "What sign can you show us for doing this?" And Jesus answered them, "Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up." But they said, "The temple has been under construction for 46 years, and you will raise it up in 3 days?" Of course, later his disciples remembered that Jesus was speaking of the temple of his body. So Jesus is changing the location of his Father's house from the temple to the temple of his body. And as we heard in the second reading today, we too are being built up into a spiritual house. So there are so many dwelling places because there are so many of us. Jesus goes on to say, "I will come again and will take you to myself, so that where I am, there you may be also." So it turns out that there is no place where God is not present. And then Jesus said, "And you know the way to the place where I'm going." Thomas said to him, "Lord, we don't know the way. We don't know where you are going. How can we know the way?" Except that Thomas really does know the way. In Lent this year, in chapter 11 of John's Gospel, when Jesus told his disciples that Lazarus has died, he said to them, "Let us go to him." And Thomas said to his fellow disciples, "Let us also go, that we might die with him." Dying and rising is the way. This is the universal path. It's the path of descent. We must descend in order to ascend. As Jesus said to the 2 disciples on the way to Emmaus, wasn't it necessary that the Messiah should suffer these things and then enter into his glory? So Jesus responds to Thomas, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." This is one of the 7 "I am" sayings in the Gospel of John. I am in the Greek is ego eimi, which is the name for God. If I ask you for directions, and you tell me, "Oh, you turn left there, and then a couple more blocks you turn right," I'm probably going to get lost. But if you lead me there, I'm pretty sure I'm going to get there. So Jesus doesn't simply point to the Father. He himself is the pathway. Last week, when we heard Jesus say, "I am the good shepherd," another of the "I am" sayings, he also said, "I am," ego eimi, the gate. Remember this old song, "So high, you can't get over it. So wide, you can't get around it. So low, you can't get under it." We must go in through the door. Jesus is the one who shows us what God is like, and in Jesus, the human and the divine meet. G.K. Chesterton, the great British Catholic writer, tells the story about a man who was entirely careless of his spiritual affairs during life, and so when he died, he went straight to hell. He was much missed by his friends on earth. In fact, his business agent went down to the gates of hell to see if there was any chance of bringing him back. But although he pleaded for the gates to be opened, the iron bars never yielded. His priest also went, and he argued he was really not a bad fellow. Given time, he would have matured. Let him out, please. The gates remained stubbornly shut. Finally, his mother came. She did not beg for his release. Quietly, she said simply to Satan, "Let me in." Immediately, the great doors swung open upon their hinges, for love goes down through the gates of hell and there redeems the dead. In the Synoptic Gospels, there's another story about a house in Capernaum. It could be helpful here. We know that Simon Peter lived in Capernaum, and Mark tells us that when Jesus was home in Capernaum, it was reported that he was home. And there was such a crowd there that nobody else could get in. You might remember the story. 4 men came with a paralyzed man on a mat. But since there was no way in, they removed the roof tiles and they let down the mat on which the paralytic lay. We were in Capernaum on our visit to Israel again in February. And there's a new church there. It's at the very top of the picture, over the house of what is thought to be Simon Peter's house. And these are the foundation walls of that house. What you can see in these stone walls, however, is that there's no mortar to keep the stones together. So as we heard in the reading today from the first letter of Peter, come to Christ, a living stone, and like living stones, let yourselves be built into a spiritual house. Well, these living stones remind us of those stone walls in Capernaum. The stones were rubbed together until they fit perfectly. It's only when we rub up against one another or are forced to do so that we learn what real charity and real community are all about. Only then are we able to grow and change and to fit together in a way that is strong, sturdy, and durable for the long haul. We saw a situation like that in the first reading today from the Acts of the Apostles. There were some problems at the community meal, and this problem was very disruptive. It threatened to tear the community apart. Well, what could they do? The 12 apostles said, we can't figure out a way to add this to our work. We already have enough work to do. But rather than let this important need go unmet, they gathered the community together and they decided to form a new ministry, something that had never been done before. And that's what living stones look like. Not holding on to an old model that's no longer working, but coming together as community and generating new possibilities. But what's most amazing is they recognized that it was God who opened up this way for them. It was God who was leading them in this new way. We have a new ministry in our church that's named after one of those 7 in that story today. Stephen Ministry grew out of a need to accompany people who are on a difficult path in their life. Anytime the community struggles to continue to be built up like living stones, it's going to mean some vulnerability. It's going to require some dying and rising. But that is the way of Jesus, of dying to self in order to rise to new life.